Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist Noah Preminger. We caught up with him in mid-April 2020 when the quarantine for COVID-19 was really getting deep. He talked about his trip back home during this crisis. He was overseas at the time. His projects and the hopeful future. Dig.
Good. How you doing?
We're holding steady here in Kansas City, Mo.
Nice.
So I kind of did read a little bit on Facebook about what you were kind of going through. So it was kind of that was kind of a backdrop to what I wanted to talk about. And, of course, I've been really trying to reach out to musicians to kind of see what I can do to kind of get the word out for anything streaming and anything otherwise. So
that's awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. You guys do so much all the time. You're an enormously tenacious group of artists. So you always do it out of love. So I have no doubt that, recovery and seeing the daylight is going to be something that's just a part of what you do anyways. I mean, life is all improv, and that's what you do all the time. So
yeah.
So exactly where are you at right now?
I'm at home in Massachusetts.
Okay. So
I'm in Boston.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and I haven't heard a whole lot from Boston proper. How's everything going over there?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I kind of shut out my anxiety after this trip that we had is like through the roof. So I tried to shut out the news basically and like Twitter for the most part. So I took a couple weeks off. But I mean, on our end, my wife and I are pretty good. She has her job, and I have my teaching still, so we're able to function sort of normal-ish. I mean, if it wasn't for like people dying and the economy being messed up, and I'm totally into this whole stay-at-home thing.
Right.
So, I mean, we're home buddies. So, I'm able to write music and work and, do the things I like to kind of do still. I bought a motorcycle the other day, so, I'm pretty, if it wasn't for those negative things, this isn't so far off from what I was doing before.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about all this is that there is already kind of a cluster of people in the world that you could consider like COVID-19 at home. It's people. There's a lot of people that don't mind being at home that are totally fine with all of this. But I guess it's just it's everything that goes into it. I mean, it's everything that's going to be the aftermath. It's the way the world's going to change. It's that notion of looking back at March 12th and 13th and thinking, DC is going to become before coronavirus, and what is going to transpire from here. I think the thing to me that's because I'm the opposite. I love to get out. It's a part of my DNA. My family's very active. We're really into sports, and I think that's the thing that I'm thinking about is that I've been watching the Royals have been putting on old games, and as much as it's nice to watch that happen, it's still so shocking to my system to see all those people together. And the fact that that's been stigmatized, psychologically speaking, in my brain is what is probably the worst to me. Same thing with like a jazz crowd. Like the last jazz show I saw was, and I had no idea, but I think we all cerebrally knew that something was up, was Bill Frisell came in with his trio, and it was at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. And towards the end, Petra got up and started singing We Shall Overcome. And just in unison, everybody in the crowd stood up and swayed. And now that I look back on that, how profound that was that we all in unison started singing that song together. And it was like right before they played Space Oddity by Bowie. And that was kind of the end of the show. But that was kind of a grand thing that I'm thinking, wow, what did we all already kind of feel at that point at March 3rd?
I mean, it's certainly important to have live music, and it changes culture not having that. And yeah, getting outside is obviously important. I don't like lock myself in a room like powder, but but anyway.
So talk to me a little bit about what you had to go through to get back home and kind of because it was kind of at the beginnings of things getting ramped up with this COVID-19 quarantine.
My wife and I had a planned honeymoon to go to Morocco at the beginning of March, and when we left, honestly, things here in the States weren't a total nightmare yet. There was word that this virus had kind of taken over China, but here in the States, it hadn't really become a huge issue in the news, and so we felt like it wasn't really a huge risk to go because just from watching the news, it seemed like it was okay, and that we could go for a week and get back, and things would be pretty cool. So we went, and as we were over there, the first 4 or 5 days we were there, we had been hearing more and more in the news, both in Morocco, like Moroccan state news, as well as U.S. news, that things were kind of getting more intense. And so we kept an eye on it. We had an amazing trip, to be honest with you. People in Morocco are really incredible, and the country is full of some really magnificent sights, and the culture is really exotic. And we had an amazing trip, except for like the last 4 or 5 days we were there. My wife got attacked by an animal and had to get rabies shots, and we had to go to like 4 different hospitals in multiple cities to find the shots, and the healthcare system's not happening there. So between that and the embassy and consulate not even giving us an American to speak to, and they locked down the country without any notice, so you couldn't get out. It was just a really kind of traumatic experience. So we eventually got out on a British rescue repetition plane because the U.S. didn't end up sending rescue planes until much later. So we got home and got groceries and hunkered down and spent a week or two sort of just, trying to adjust to this current situation and trying to eliminate some of the anxiety from the trip. And since then, just been teaching online. I've been really fortunate over the years to have consistent teaching. And so haven't been hit too hard by the kind of the economic issues of being a performing jazz musician. I mean, had a couple of really nice gigs canceled, like the Vancouver Jazz Festival just got canceled, and had a tour with trombonist Pete McCarron that just got canceled. And next up is July, and supposed to play at North Sea Jazz Festival with my group and a couple other things. So we'll see, I play every weekend in Boston at a jazz club called Wally's. Obviously, that hasn't been happening for a month or so. So there are definitely gigs that I'm missing, and I haven't touched my tenor saxophone in probably 6 weeks.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like playing the instrument at home. I usually just play piano at home, but I haven't touched it in over a month. So sometimes it's nice to get away from the instrument, but I don't know what's healthy and what's not healthy anymore.
I agree. Yeah, I think everything's been kind of scrambled. I think the one thing that is becoming more of a possibility to kind of get some semblance of normalcy back is that, they're talking about sports without fans or limited amounts of people. And, my son, he's 15 and he's really into sports. We've been watching bowling, and they've kind of adapted to it. And they have these tournaments in Vegas with family and friends, and I'm watching it actually kind of happen in this new world, and it makes sense. And they're even talking about, some of these players are actually doing a little bit better without all of the distractions. I think that would be a different thing, for music, but at the same time, if there's a way that things can be done in a remote way, it might be nice. So, and I've noticed in Kansas City too, there's musicians that are really gigging a lot, and my wife and I are getting on Venmo and supporting them, and that's kind of a thing. So, my question to you is this: there's going to be a couple questions for you. What can anybody, fans of jazz out there that really want to support artists through this so we get to the daylight, what can they do that would be the best thing to support the jazz community?
Buy their recordings, for sure. If you don't buy CDs or vinyl, buy their downloads. I sell all my music on my website, as do a lot of musicians, and a lot of us sell, WAV and MP3 downloads, as well as CDs and vinyl. If you don't want to actually have to touch the physical, which is sort of the direction we're moving in anyway. But so buy our recordings. I've got a new record coming out in the fall on Steeplechase, and I'm making another recording in September with Dan Weiss and Ben Monder. It's a trio record. And I had a record that came out months ago called Jigsaw. The music is Steve Lampert. That's available on my website. And a lot of people are releasing music through this. So buy the recordings. That's the best way to support them.
So we are going to get out of this. We're going to return to the stage and the crowd. And my question to you is this: what revelations do you hope that we all collectively, as musician and crowd, get from this experience, that maybe we go in a little bit wiser, or we have some revelations from this experience?
I think everyone's going to be different, and some people will appreciate live music more. I think some people might realize they don't need live music. And, to each their own. It's really hard to say. I think that it's going to be interesting for younger people. People keep talking about kids that are born during this time, but I'm thinking more of the kids that are in in middle school or high school, where they sort of have, I was listening to your interview with Mary Halverson from I guess that was the other day, and she was talking about, you had asked her about growing up and music she had been listening to, and she was talking about being in high school and going to Newport Jazz Festival and checking out all the concerts, and it had me thinking man, all these people who are, I don't know, between 8, when people mostly pick up instruments, and 18, when they sort of do their first digging into the music, they're not going to have that opportunity now during this time, during these summer festivals, or when they're off from school and they can go hear concerts with their friends or with their family or whatever. So, who knows how long this will last, and maybe it won't have that big of an impact. I think this might be a while. Not that I have any idea, but it feels like it could last a long time, depending on the country. And so it might have a bigger impact than we think on people in that age group. I know, just speaking personally, as a kid, one of the biggest impacts in the jazz world for me was going to see a Joshua Redman concert with my parents, and I was like, damn, I want to be able to play like that, with that kind of emotion, and that sort of that fun, emotional kind of expressive thing. And if I had missed out on that, who knows where I would have been now? Maybe who knows? So anyway, the younger generation, worried about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing, and I think that's the thing that's so, in a meta way, revelatory about asking this question to musicians. There's such a range of answers, and I think one of the ones that was the most intriguing to me was a young musician from New York that went back home to Columbus, and they have a recording that's going to come out, their debut, and they were saying that, you know, when Miles and Coltrane and all those cats were doing their thing, it was during a time of extreme racism. It was a time of the country recovering from a world war, and albeit this is different, but there's a lot of adversity in all of this. And then once we get back, there's a potentiality that there could be another, like, birth of an idiom in jazz. I mean, bebop was born out of all that, and it wasn't done for a commercial reason. Record companies weren't like, we have to come up with this new sound so we can sell it. They just did it because they felt it. It was in their soul. So there's almost a part of me that believes that, and I've always felt this since I've done the show since 2011, there's got to be a way that the public will understand jazz and it will become something that was always, it was the forefront music for a long time. So is there anything in you that believes that maybe there's going to be a reinvention of things? I mean, Nicholas Payton has already put out 2 albums that have been specifically quarantine flavored for this. And, you know, so there's that potentiality. Have you pondered that at all?
No, not really. I mean, it's such a deep art form, possibly the deepest, that I think that the average listener really struggles to understand what's going on, and it's hard for them to really feel comfortable listening to it, I guess. And then on top of that, paying large amounts of money to experience it on a regular basis. I mean, you need repeat customers, basically. And so, and I say it's deep because as an improviser, you need to be able to, I mean, jazz is about improvisation and the feel, obviously, rhythmic feel. But with improvisation, you know, the improviser needs to get to a place where they can have basically a free mind. That's the deepest level of improvisation, where you can play a concert and maybe like you don't remember anything about it, or kind of time stood still. And so that's a hard thing for the average listener to grasp. Watching and listening to a person get to a place where they basically have a free imagination, because they don't understand what that is. And I think a lot of improvisers don't either. So I'm not sure that it'll ever get to a point where it'll be popular or have, you know, a ton of enthusiasm behind it. At least, like, I'm not talking about like popular jazz. I'm talking about like true improvisational jazz music. And so I think there's certainly, I mean, it's been proven that there's a place for popular jazz music without even needing to name names. I mean, there's been people you know, on covers and on Good Morning America or whatever that are, you know, jazz musicians, but it's more pop based. So, no, I mean, look, what do I know, you know? But I can't imagine that your average listener would ever, you know, be super into this. I think it's an anomaly that it happened to begin with, you know, maybe just because it was new. And it was danceable. You know, and then as soon as it lacked the dance quality, I think you know, things sort of faded. But yeah, I guess it's a part of the mix of contemplating, because we just don't know how this is going to spiral out, where it's going to go. I don't think I've talked to one person that has said, yeah, this is going to be a quick turnaround. I've only heard that things are getting canceled and there's just this unknown. I mean, just here in Kansas City, for instance, the only real spoke of daylight that we've gotten is that they have extended the stay at home until May 15th. And after that, we're going to kind of follow some of these federal mandates of slowly opening certain things up. And that's the hope, that, you know, we peak and that the curve gets flattened. And I almost feel like half the time with a lot of this, they're just saying this so we don't all lose total hope. Because even with school, like, school's here, we're supposed to go back at the end of April. And then
just a couple weeks ago, they canceled everything, and it's done for the year. And there's like, they didn't even do that in New York yet. New York's the epicenter, the worst place. I mean, they canceled school through the end of the year in Kansas right when this started, like maybe a week and a half into this. So like around March 20th, and everybody was in shock. They were like, "What are you talking about?" Through the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And
they should cancel it for the rest of the year. I'm a believer that we should stay inside until this is like totally settled down. And they're saying that there could be another spike even after it comes down a little bit in numbers. So, to think that anytime soon, large groups of people, especially like older jazz bass, are going to go and like buy tickets, like $100 tickets to go, to a jazz festival. There's no freaking way. No way. I can't believe that there would be any summer jazz festivals in the world this year. But, I got a nice tour in the fall with my quartet in Europe. I sure hope it happens, but I can't imagine that we're going to be working in the fall. Or in the winter. I can't imagine that any large groups of people are going to be getting together and hearing jazz music this year. So, maybe I'll be shocked and maybe that'll happen, but, we'll see what happens. But I think that we should stay inside. I think that we should limit contact, unless you really need to. I mean, I tore my shoulder 20 years ago and it's been getting worse and worse. And, I'm like tomorrow I need to go, to an MRI, an imaging place to get my shoulder checked out, for potential surgery, and I'm freaked out to go to it.
Right.
I'm gonna cocoon myself on my way over there to make sure I'm not exposed to anything. But it's scary, it's so we'll see. Yeah, it's a drag not having baseball, and I can't imagine they're gonna have sports. Do you think? Even with empty stadiums?
I think there's a potentiality that, the one thing that baseball has done as a function in our society is it always comes back in when we need it the most. And I think there's enough moxie and intellect and strategy that we can get to some semblance of it, because I think it's going to really help people out, because the notion that we're going to be squeezed off from all of these things that have made us not only a society, but as healthy, functioning people is going to be almost unimaginable. And I think I understand killing this virus off, but I also understand, too, there's a mental health part of it. For instance, I just moved in January from one burb to another. I moved to the hometown of Pat Metheny and Lee Summit. And it's a great community, vibrant, very bustling. It's almost kind of another Kansas City. And I've noticed more sirens lately. I've noticed a lot of, and it's not, I don't think it's specifically COVID-19 related. And I say this because of this. About 2 weeks into this, I don't ever go to the doctor. I don't ever have to go in and do anything. I'm helping my mother-in-law cut the handle off of the milk jug. And I'm being very conscious to cut away from my body with a very sharp razor. I just got her. She was a nurse for 30 years, and she's like, I'm not going to do this, instead of using some old garden shears. And I just couldn't stand watching it. So I'm like, I'll do it. So my male ego starts getting out there, and I'm cutting, and my very last cut, I go right into me. Run upstairs, under the cap. She looks down, says, you got to go to the emergency room. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. And I'm like, how is this happening? So I wrap it up, almost faint, that whole thing, which I don't know how that works, but it's like, it wasn't even that much blood. But we go in, and the hospital's really not that busy, and they put a mask on the minute I walk in, put on sanitizer, taking temperatures, all of that. It was totally fine. My wife couldn't come back there with me, and I had to get 6 stitches, and I'm going through it. Well, I'm talking to the ER doc, and he's a very hardcore guy. Like, he was getting ready to go to Peru to climb mountains. I mean, he was a serious dude. But he was cool. He had a good sense of humor, and I was like, just talk to me about this. And he said, we don't have to worry about this. Guys like us at our age and in our health, we don't have to worry about it. It's the older generations. It's the older folks that we have to worry about. And I think that's really the thing about this that's very key. And I think a lot of the older generations aren't even going to venture out. And but again, that puts strains on mental health and all these other things because people can't visit each other and do what we're supposed to do, what we've been groomed to do our whole lives. So
it's a different world. I mean, look, I lost both my last two grandparents this last month. Neither to the COVID virus, but to old age. I mean, they're both 91, and but we couldn't be there with them. They, died alone. And when we went to the cemetery, there could only be a couple of us from the family, and we couldn't be near each other. We couldn't even hug. I mean, it's a different thing. So, older people obviously, and anybody at risk of, at higher risk, clearly needs to be very careful. And unfortunately, that's a huge part of the jazz community, are people over the age of 65.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, again, if you want to enjoy the music still, buy people's records if you want to try to support. That's really the best way, I think. Or take lessons with people. There's so many people offering lessons online and stuff. It's sort of like changed the whole social media landscape. But there's people offering discounts on lessons and selling their manuscript online, or people doing like these Patreon lesson things. More and more of that's popping up now due to majority performers needing to make some sort of an income. I mean, I got my $1,200 check, but it doesn't really help too much, So anyway, crazy.
Yeah, it is. Well, hey man, stay safe, and thank you for taking a minute out today to talk about the music, and hopefully we'll talk when times are better.
That would be great. And thank you for doing these interviews. You are a pleasure to talk to. You ask great questions, and you're one of the best interviewers out there. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking this time.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Boston, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Noah for his time and dedication to jazz. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends, and support all of the arts.
Neon Jazz.